Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Mendelson, and today we are going to be talking about the introduction to Native American studies and my little bit of extended research on this topic. George Washington is not the best of people, and neither were the initial American immigrants. We've discovered this through our textbook readings that the initial immigrants and pilgrims were not the nice and jolly Thanksgiving eating turkey friendly people that collaborated with the Native Americans to make a beautiful society that we know as America, where everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya. And as I was reading the material, I was more and more interested behind why Americans justified their actions and how they were able to drive Native Americans into a corner the way that they did. Today, we're going to be reviewing three different belief systems that prompted Americans to act in the ways that they did towards the Native American people, followed by the tragic story of modern day Oklahoma and the 5 civilized tribes. First of all, let's talk about Mary Campbell, one of 200 children that were captured and kidnapped around 1756, before independence had even been an idea. Native Americans in Delaware were kidnapping local citizens to kind of send a message out because they weren't very pleased with the fact that they had strangers on their territory. I think that's pretty understandable, but the measures that they had taken really set up a bad stigma for them. And local settlers started to view Native Americans as these beasts, as these savages, even as these demons that would use these immoral attack strategies and not attack in plain sight in the middle of day, which really had spread around because at the time there was not a lot of settlers, so word got around fast. So following this, once America had already achieved its independence, they had to fight for it yet again in the War of 1812. But this time, Native Americans were fighting alongside the British, and they were receiving ammunition and guns amongst other weaponry. And this had upset the Americans, who later had won the war, and certainly were not very willing and amped up about the idea of sharing land and territory with these people. Finally, Manifest Destiny was an ideology that caused many Europeans to believe that they were divinely meant to traverse westward as far as they could and take up the entirety of North America from the east to the west. Even though they didn't understand what a distance this was, it didn't matter. Because they believed that they were the most intelligent and gifted beings, that they would know exactly what to do with these natural resources, unlike these hunters and these savages that were currently occupying these territories. Because they had better economic opinions and systems, as well as agricultural systems, they believed that they were simply meant to make use of all of the resources within the land. And between these three ideologies, they were justifying their harmful practices. Now let's move into one of the most impactful occurrences and effects of this harmful mentality. To start us off, we had the 13 colonies, which were not quite satisfied with the land and resources which they already had, and they felt that it was okay in 1830, under the rule of Andrew Jackson, to take over these 5 states right over here, which were under Native American rule. Now, I'm not going to get too far into this because it is covered in chapter 6, but the Trail of Tears ensued, in which thousands and thousands of Native Americans had to traverse over thousands of miles in order to get into what is modern day Oklahoma. This was so that the white settler would be able to utilize resources such as cotton, amongst other things which they needed for a prospering economy. Whether it was at the Native Americans' expense did not matter. So the Native Americans moved into this little box, which was about a quarter of the land that they once had. And it was so far west that at the time the white settlers did not believe that it was possible for them to ever reach them and that they would be safe over there in the corner where it didn't really matter. However, manifest destiny prevailed and they continued to expand west, which is how they found themselves in this little box over here, which was called no man's land, which the government was like, listen, we designated this area to the Native Americans, but you know what? You guys can have a little piece of it. Except they started to build railroads, and next thing you know, half of the state is just taken. So at this point, white men have started to assimilate within Native American society, and they're sharing this land. And the idea is to kind of create this culture where they both have the same values and principles, etc. Didn't work out. At this point, this little section right here is the only trace of Native American culture that's left within Oklahoma, and the rest of it is just white people and Native Americans who just got too tired of getting kicked out and scammed for their land. Or forcefully removed, whatever the case may have been. There was a pattern, a trajectory, and the Native American chiefs understood that this was the last sliver of hope that they had for any land that they would ever be able to keep. So, during an era in which state creation had become the trend, a very large group of Native Americans and even white people had gathered in order to try to create a Native American state, a state in which culture would be able to have been preserved. 35,000 words were written. An entire constitution was created with laws and amendments. It was unanimously ratified by the local counties. And when it was brought to Congress's front desk, it was declined. Matter of fact, it wasn't even looked at because Theodore Roosevelt did not want more Democratic people representing the congressmen and the Senate. And nobody wanted brown people to represent the government. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end very well. Many years had passed thereafter, and Native Americans had experienced continuous discrimination and forceful assimilation into American society. But amongst their little numbers, they did continue to represent their people, making Oklahoma the second largest state in terms of Native American population. And the kind of silver lining far down the road is that the descendants of these Native American tribes received somewhat of a reimbursement. And that in 2020, the Supreme Court had returned 3 million acres back to the Native American people because they had recognized the injustice that their predecessors had committed. And this leads us into our second discussion question, which asks, is this a sufficient amount of land and reimbursement, or should they have given more? Should they have given less? What would you have done if you were in their shoes? And now it's going to swap back over to me with the rest of the discussion questions. Here are the discussion questions that will be also accessible through a PDF that's going to be attached to this document, to this video. And here are my works cited if you are interested in how I found out this information. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry if this was a difficult presentation to watch.